before we go down this path and talk about things, I think it's really important that we have clarity as to where we are now. In order to have clarity as to where we are now, we need to know how we've gotten here, how we've arrived at this point. So, I'm sure this is still fresh in quite a few of your minds. Back in 2016, there was a merger. Now, it was two councils that probably weren't considered fit for merger. It's been bandied about. It was effectively, you can't put two donkeys together to make a racehorse, but by Christ, we're giving it a red hot go. So that happened back then. Even when you think about, from 2016, it was certainly well prior. There has been a systemic revenue problem going back decades for both councils, both Armidale in its various iterations and Guyra in its various iterations. So we need to fix that up. And some real problems. So people might say, well, why are you only addressing this now? Why are you only starting to, expose it as to it now? Well, I'm not really sure. There could be any number of reasons. So in some cases, I'd say councillors probably weren't provided with the relevant information. Did they really know what was going on in their council? Both organisations, both Armidale and Guyra, had underestimated or ignored the real costs of maintaining their assets, particularly the road network. So that is a reality. And then at some point in the past 25 years, the councils, both in Armidale and Guyra, they missed the opportunity to set their rates appropriately. Don't know exactly when, but if at some point in the past we'd taken stock of what our asset maintenance needs were, and we'd set our rates appropriately, it wouldn't have been a big set, but it would have been a set, then we would have tracked along okay. But that didn't happen. So what it has done is that's just the cumulative impact of underinvestment in our assets. It's meant we've just had an inevitable decline of the region. There's nothing more for it. So as a result, we now have this multi-million-dollar year-on-year shortfall in asset maintenance, and that backlog is swamping us. So how that's been addressed in the past was just not to do it. Now, the weather hasn't helped, but if you think about the lack of maintenance and the weather, that's why our roads are what they are. It's not unique to our council, by the way. What I'm hoping will be unique is the way that we have the courage to make some changes and fix it up. So I want to guide you through what that will be. So it also means, and so with that lack of funds to not maintain our assets, it also means that we don't have the funds to grow our region. So, a lot of what I've heard over the last few months is, why doesn't council just go for grants? Grants are out there, and they are. But most grants require a co-contribution. And so co-contributions really are a way of vetting. They're a vetting mechanism that governments can use to determine, is this particular council or region worth backing? Governments want to back a winner. So if you can't provide the co-contribution, it's a pretty good indication that you're not the winner. And Armidale and Guyra historically have never, looking back, have struggled to do those co-contributions. As a result, we're getting scraps. We've always gotten scraps, but we need to change that. So that's meant that investment in the region has been difficult. We require 100% funding for things. And that's likely to dry up. So all of these problems, the asset maintenance, not being able to grow because we can't pitch in for co-contributions, we can't actually go out on our own and do our own council-led initiatives, they really have to be addressed now because we can't kick that can further down the road. So it really means, using this road analogy a bit, but we really are at a fork in the road. And we have, probably at the extreme, two options before us. We can manage the decline. I'd say for quite a while we've been on an unmanaged decline. We can manage the decline, or alternatively we can grow our way out. Now, managing the decline here, the challenge with that, and I think the problem with that, it'll say a lot about what sort of a region are we. Because if you manage the decline, it's going to be the most vulnerable in our community who suffer the most. They're the ones that use the bulk of our services, or disproportionately more of the services than, say, those of us who are slightly better off do. So they will be the ones that suffer because services are going to have to be reduced. So growth really is our only option. Growth was also the one, economic growth was also the item at the top of the community plan. So hence we have a growth initiative. This slide here really is the stark reality of our region. Let me explain what it is. It's the gross regional product. So it really is primarily driven by jobs. But what does our region produce? Armidale here is the orange. For 20 years, and probably going back 10 years prior to that, we're flatlined. We haven't produced anything more. The other thing to bear in mind, this hasn't been adjusted for CPI. If you made a CPI adjustment, we've gone downhill. The one at the top is Toowoomba that's gone nuts. I am told that the growth path for Tamworth is similar. But then if you look at every other region here, which is Wagga, Ballarat, Bendigo, Toowoomba, Coffs and Port Macquarie, they've all trended up. So we are a region that has stagnated in what we produce. So hence, one of the first actions of the new council was a commitment to grow jobs by 4,000 additional jobs by 2040. So that should equate to another 10,000 additional people. If we can do that, if we can get more people in, then many of the things that we perceive as problems will be washed away. A lot of the symptoms, a lot of the problems we have are actually symptoms of a low population. So we would also become large enough to have our own gravitational pull. So that's going to be important to attract investment from industry. It's going to be important for government investment as well. Once we're larger, we're just that little bit too small, and we've stayed that way. So it really is incumbent on us as a council to map out a plan to grow our way out of it. We've gone through some rigorous budgeting and induction on a whole bunch of the council services. This is us as a group of councillors. It's revealed that our financial position to influence this is severely restricted. We just don't have the money to grow our way out. We're relying on scraps and good luck. So to fix it, we need to shore up our current operations and get back to basics. So we've got this solid launching pad from which to grow. Now, thematically, we've called that Restore and Thrive. So what we're talking about here, this is our plan at the moment. In this coming financial year, we're going to and the following financial year, we're going to concentrate on our core activities. So it's roads, rates and rubbish with a little bit of infrastructure renewal there. Just need to jump here. This is where, if you just look at the pie graph on the right, we have an annual $7 million, we have a shortfall of $7 million every year to properly maintain our assets. So that's not pump $7 million in and it's all fixed. Our asset base, primarily our roads, there is a shortfall there of $7 million. So that is a gap that needs to be plugged year on year on year. So it really is a problem with our capital budget. The $3 million that's in here as well is in this coming financial year, if we take a growth strategy, we will go into a deficit by $3 million. We will use our reserves to do that, and then we need to climb our way up through income generation. So we're going to spend time gearing up for growth. We're going to allocate a small planning budget to help plot a course for the future. So something else, this is probably a handy thing to do, efficiency. It's something a lot of people, I had a fellow call me today about it as well. Surely you can be more efficient. Well, there's always room for improvement. Armidale went through a fit for the future episode. We've pared things back. I honestly believe if we are going to grow, we are at bare bones and we are at a good launching pad. Just a few graphs in here, employee cost comparisons. This is as a percentage of revenue. Armidale Regional Council about 31%. The Northern Region, so similar, councils up this way are 34%. Those with a population of less than 70,000. Their spend on staff is 32%. New South Wales, more broadly, is 36%. So we are fairly tight. Population per full-time equivalent. This is a fairly crude measure, but I think a very effective measure. Are we overstaffed or understaffed? Well, we're looking after population divided by full-time equivalent people, 113 compared to an average, regional city, regional town of 107. So there is some efficiency in there. There have actually been some savings post-merger. Now, this is both efficiency and there's the sale of some assets. We are targeting, and it's built into the budget, an additional $1 million of ongoing savings to kick in as well. So we are truly looking at that. It's not something that has been lost. So this is if we are to take a growth target, a growth approach. We'll touch on fleetingly what a decline might be, but that would be to just start shedding services, which will, reduce, living within what we currently drag in, but it will mean that we are a different place. So just come back here. What we really want, though, and where we're looking ahead, is years 3 and 4. This is where we're going to grow. So there's a few things here. So region building infrastructure. We've talked about Malpas Dam and we've talked about other water security in the past. There's a few familiar faces here, so I'm sure you've heard me talk about that. Getting our runway fixed so we can get in and out properly. We've got water bombers, freight, etc., etc. But also to consider some of our engine room jobs. So where are we at the moment? Up the top here, we have the sort of jobs, this is what we produce in our region. These are the jobs. Traditional farming and grazing, retail trade, accommodation, finance, education, health and construction. The emerging engine room jobs are things like with renewable energy, agriculture, techie agriculture, intensive horticulture and manufacturing. They're the things that we'd be able to bring online if we grow. And some of those opportunities are kind of presenting themselves to us. They're there, we just need to grab them. Others are going to take a bit of time, but there certainly is the opportunity to do that and get that all up and running. The other thing that we can do are council-led developments. So this is when you drive into another bustling town, it's usually through council-led developments. That's when you drive in and the civic areas just look fun. There's a lot going on. They don't have to be big regions. One that really stands out for me is Emerald in central Queensland. It'd have to be half the size of us, but it's bustling. There's that council-led development. So, the sorts of things that we have there, we'd be able to have proper housing strategies, we'd be able to do property acquisitions. So, in terms of, grabbing other civic buildings from an Armidale perspective, it could be the courthouse, we'd be able to do those sorts of things. But more importantly, we'd be able to invest in community amenity. So think about our road network, and that's where our shortfall is. That's what you guys drive on. Hydrotherapy pool, enlivening creeklands at various town centres, additional or improved playgrounds. So all of those things that we don't have are what we could have. And why that's important is that we are in a population war. We're trying to compete with other regions for people to move here. And if our public amenities aren't up to scratch or aren't what people are expecting, then they're just going to go elsewhere. And we'll stay with, just those of us here who love the place for different reasons. So we do need these, so they'd be sporting precincts, CBD precincts, parks, etc., etc. So, a bit of a turnaround strategy. We're keen not to give you more of the same. That said, if the community comes back and says, council, we want more of the same, we're experts at it. So it's doable, but I have never had anyone come up to me and say, Sam, more of the same would just be brilliant. So we are committed to gearing up for growth, but we can't do it with a crippled council. So these are just where we're going to be financially. They'll make your eyes roll there. There's not much there to that you really want to digest. So let's cut to the chase, shall we? So what I want to flag with you, what I want to talk about, is that we need to look at our revenue streams. So there are a few things that we're going to do. Firstly is cost recoveries, where we can, so commercial assets such as the airport. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to need to increase rates, and there's been a lot on social media about that. I want to tell you exactly what it will mean, because some numbers are rubbery. It's no fault of anyone's, but percentages that get bandied about, where those percentages apply, it's important that you know where that is, because lack of clarity doesn't help anyone. So firstly, there's a few comparatives. Rating, this is where we get our money from. So overwhelmingly, as a percentage of revenue, residential's 60%, farmland rates are 26%, business 14%, and mining's $100,000, so which comes in at no percent rounded to the nearest 0%. So what do we mean by the rates? What council is proposing, and this is part of a separate discussion, but so we have to go through a different process. We are proposing to apply for a 50% special rate variation. So I'll walk you through what all of that means. So here are some comparative rates. We've got Armidale, Tamworth, Coffs, Bathurst, Orange, Wagga, Dubbo. I'm sure they're floating around, so we are fairly low. That's for residential. Business, so we're the one on the left. Farmland, ordinary rates per person. We take our rates divided by the number of people. And so what does it mean when we talk about 50% rate variation? It's not on your entire rates bill. So this is a real live example, I believe. It's been anonymised. This is Mr. and Mrs. Gillespie. It's only on the two categories at the top. The rates as it relates to the property. It's not to do with the different charges. Okay. So in this example, which is from Guyra, of the total $1,996 rates bill, the 50% increase would only apply to the top two categories, which in this example are $526. Now we're proposing that rather than it all happen in one hit, that 50% increase in these amounts here be spread over a 3-year period. Now, bearing in mind, this is what we are going to apply for. This is what we're going to consult with the community about. So the I part requires us to go out to the community and seek more input specifically, but I'm flagging here with you now what it really means. So for this Guyra example, it would be an increase of $263, but spread over a 3-year period for that to come in. So it's not 50% increase on this $2,000 bill. So that's where a bit of the confusion comes in. People look at that and say 50% increase, my $2,000 bill next will become $3,000. It won't. In 3 years' time, it's likely, this is assuming everything doesn't change, it's likely that will increase by $263. We'll have some questions at the end of it. Because we're spreading it over a 3-year period, in this example here, that would be an extra $87 per annum, or $1.68 per week. Now that's cumulative to build up to the 263. An example for Armidale, because we're doing this exercise in Armidale tomorrow night, same thing applies. It's just for the top one, but because Armidale rates are higher, In this example here, they would be paying an extra $957 by year 3. We're going to spread that over the 3-year period, so it will build up by $162 per annum. So whilst all of these things haven't yet been finalised, and these are some averages here as well, whilst these things haven't been finalised, we need to go out there. There is going to be an increase, but it's not on the entire rate bill. A couple of things to note. A 50% special rate variation, that refers to the total revenue received from rates. So it doesn't, and this is important, if we grow, this burden is going to be shared by more people. So the cost per individual ratepayer will be reduced. That's why growth is important. That's why when we go back and we look at comparative rates for the bigger regional towns, Tamworth, Orange, etc., they do have more people there to shed the load, even though their individual rates are a bit higher. But our lack of growth for 25 years has meant that we are bearing that burden. We need to grow our way out of it. So everything there needs to change. So that's the big picture. Our public exhibition periods, I've seen some people saying it's not quick enough or whatever. It's all driven, Renata will tell me, she'll nod, by statute, what we have to put out and by when. So it does seem a bit hurried, but I want to assure you we're not doing that to hide anything. We're trying to be as transparent as possible, because any solution to grow our way out of this is going to take all of us, and we can only all be involved if we as a council are totally transparent. So, questions? I should say, we're also filming this, and actually, Renata, should we up the light? So, we're filming this because we want to put this on, well, there's another cure for insomnia, just so people can watch in their own free time. So, I'll get you to ask a question. If you could tell me who you are, ask your question, myself or any of the councillors or exec will answer it. If it's tricky, I'm going to throw it to the council. It's question. David. Oh, sorry, better say you are.
Thank you. David Vera. That made it worse. David Vera. Mine's a statement more than a question. When the administrator was in power here, his thoughts were, he told me that many other people wanted to have glass houses in Guyra. The other one is we had a development officer, and he was pushing things forward, and I was very heavily involved in the current glass house, which is now 800 jobs. Can we ask you to look at having a development officer and to look back on what the administrator said in relation to glass houses in Guyra? Maybe the problem will be solved with the numbers here and the people, the investment in this little town.
Thank you. Absolutely, we have identified intensive horticulture as one of our unique growing points, growth options. I'll defer to the GM as to what the best position is to really grow that, but I know, take that on board. Anyone else?
Thank you, Hans Heatbrink.
Oh, he's loud.
Too loud.
Thank you for that. 50% increase over 3 years. You apply to IPART. What if IPART knocks it back or says you're only going to get 20% over 3 years? Do you have a contingency plan to fill that gap that's needed?
We have to play with what we're given. I'll ask some of my fellow councillors to chime in as well. We were presented with a number of different options. One of them was the growth that we've gone with. The other one that we explored but didn't spend as much detail on was at, say, 35%. What would that mean? What it really would mean is slower growth. So we'll have to work with what we've got. It will just take longer to claw our way out. And the real problem and why is that we won't be able to get, it'll just be more difficult to attract the population we need. So we might be cutting off our, well, we wouldn't be doing the cutting, IPART's decided to do the cutting. That's my thought. Fellow councillors, anything to add?
Not really.
I think, thanks. We drew an analogy when we were speaking to some groups last week, so Callan and a couple of others heard this, but what we do, Hans, is a very, very good question. If it's not delivered at the rate that we're expecting, of course, we just have to pare back, and as Sam said, take a long time, but we drew an analogy about how we're headed at the moment, and the plane that we're on is headed firmly towards the ground, so we're going to crash. At the 35%, we probably think we'll clip the top of the mountain, and at 50% we think we'll clear it and fly away to success. So he's hoping that IPART are generous in the way that they receive our request and grant it. At the same time, they've got to be listening loudly to intently to the community. So the community feedback's got to be important to our success overall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is anyone else?
Question?
Well, so just before we, one of the key things, we'll have to make a decision on what infrastructure we have. What do we let go? What don't we? So speaking with various groups, last week, well, in the last little while about this, one of our real commitments has to be to maintain, the reason we need to do this is to maintain our infrastructure. So we need to engage, rural roads is the big and obvious one. We do need to sit down and be really transparent about how we are going to spend this money and, what we will do for it. So it is about spending, it's not about hoarding, it's not about filling a bathtub up with cash and rolling around. So, but part of the IPART process, and I haven't been through this, but quite a few have, is that we do have to have that genuine engagement with the community. We have to get that community feedback, and all of that is going to be taken into account. Sorry, there was another question.
Yes, Sam, Michael Mulligan, Fanlo. It might be a bit self-centric, but the last slide you showed. So I'm on a farm, and I'm in Guyra, and so I'm looking at $900 there at the bottom. That increase each year for 3 years.
Yep.
Now, there's obviously some mathematics in there that I'm not quite. It's probably not your area. It's probably a mathematical explanation for why. Is it because perhaps my land is worth, or Guyra's land, is worth more than Armadale's land?
It'll be. This is a problem with averages, particularly when it comes to farmland, because the size and the value of the property is really what's going to impact it. So statisticians talk about the sum of an average doesn't equal the average of a sum. So I didn't just say that to confuse you, but it is true. So I think the best bet would be to dig out one of your old rates notices, and you'd be able to do those calculations on you. I don't like that because it looks ugly. It doesn't suit what I'm trying to sell you. But the best thing to do would be to dig out an old rates notice, and seriously, I'm going to load up staff here. If you've got any concerns, email Todd. But we could do that calculation for you, and I think we could make that offer and work it out.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, that's really a non-answer to what is a really valid question, but I can't do it on the fly. I just had a chap here who's like at an auction, he's not really indicating.
See, my name's David Beaucaire. Congratulations on your role as mayor. I just don't think it's enough. What I'm reading and that, at 22, I think 22.5%, it was going to get us about another 1.5 million. Was that?
I think so, Kelly.
Yeah. So, 50%. What I'm saying is I don't think it's going to be enough to really turn the tide. from what, as a businessman, that's the way I see it. I mean, I'm not confident also in some of your staff there in council. I rang up with a proposal to do something which may bring business to the town, and I was told that I had to pay $360 as a pre-DA fee. Wasn't even talking about a DA. That's what I was told. So I'm not confident in the people that you've got there, and I'm not confident that you've cut your costs enough to be able to cover it. And more than anything, not confident it's going to be enough to pull us out. That's really...
So the way that, and Kelly can nod or not, the cumulative impact would be an additional $3 million in the first year if we spread it over 3 years, an additional $6 million in the second year, about another 10 and a bit in the third.
But you're accumulating losses all the way through.
Well, we will, but we can cut our cloth to meet. We'll just have to cut our cloth to meet it. If we've got the 50% straight away, we're home and hose. But look, there's probably nothing I can say to you with a general question, lack of confidence in staff and maybe haven't got our numbers right. My obvious response would be, everyone's great, and yes, we have. But happy to have a more detailed conversation offline.
You can do it. Yes. But one of the things that Sam did mention earlier on was that if we put ourselves in a financially more sound position, we are also in a much better position to be able to restore grants. If we can put something in, we will get something back. At the moment, we are getting the scraps. So it just puts us in a more robust position. I wondered, like you in the beginning, whether it would be enough. I mean, the first time I heard it, I nearly fell out of my chair. I was in Europe, and I wasn't at one of the budget meetings when it was discussed. But then when you actually start to go and break it down, I thought, well, it sounds reasonable. And then when we dug more in, you say, well, is it enough? But just gauging by the reaction of the general public at the moment, it sounds like it might be too much.
Well, you may have to amalgamate. That's what happened.
Amalgamate with who? With Sydney or?
Well,
Sydney City Council is very flush with funds.
The other thing to bear in mind is what's really impacting our maintenance costs is the lack of maintenance. So if we could just do that little bit more, our backlog gets reduced a little bit more next time, so we're on top of things anyway.
Sam, Donna Davidson, just a question. With business for Guyra, is that tomato farm only $192 or is that farmland? Where do they fall into that?
It's relative to the price of the business.
They're in a separate category called intensive horticulture, which is not shown on that slide, but we've got details.
So what would their increase be?
Well, they'd be exactly the same. So
Pro rata.
Pro rata,
Yeah.
50%. Yes.
Yeah. Upstairs over here. Just a couple of points if you don't mind. Oh, Cameron, Ben Lomond. Yes, Community Representative Ben Lomond. First thing I want to say is, on an intuitive level, having watched the change of General Manager and the new council, I get a more positive feel about Armidale Regional Council. In part because I think it's functioning with less denial of its past failures and dysfunctions. I really like you adding the stage of, because the administrator previously became mayor, just pumped out Thrive. And I really like that you've added a step before that, which is sort of stabilise. And I think that's really important stuff in issues. And I really believe that next term is going to be about that, because you've got to get things realistic and right and sort out past bad patterns. And one of the signs for me that represents things that are improving is in our Ben Lomond community, which is a self-managed rural village. We've been consulted by Armidale since amalgamation of how we'd like Armidale Regional Council to relate to us. And I have spent probably 100 hours plus carefully responding, and each time it has been completely ignored. And I know L1.3 in the new community plan actually recognise that rural villages should have some degree of self-determination in how they manage themselves. It finally went in and was heard. I really appreciate and I see that as a very positive sign in Armidale's culture. And I want to also thank the actual paid staff in Armidale Council that had the task of having to assimilate all those inputs. It's a very difficult task. We have to do it for our community. It's a really difficult task to do well, and I've read through what I can in 72 hours, the usual short time frame. But, you know, I'm seeing some real positives there. I just want to acknowledge that focus. I want to now mention 3 myths that I think still keep bouncing around. They're zombie myths. The first one is any council is inherently incredibly inefficient and there's vast room for great, savings and efficiency. I don't think that's true anywhere, particularly in rural regional councils. I'm not saying that Armidale can improve, but I just want to say that's one of the myths that keep going around. Another myth is when you community consult and you say, how do you think we should grow? Everybody goes, tourism. I'm not sure how informed that view is. I'm sure tourism is part of our asset, but so is lifestyle and so is other things. Like I was working with Tony Windsor and the Minister for Telecommunications back then and actually put Armidale on the map to be an experimental zone before amalgamation. To be one of the first rural centres to get fibre right through the town. Where was Armidale's capacity before amalgamation to seize that opportunity? It just didn't happen. You had a university, you had First NBN, and a whole lot of stuff. So I don't think tourism is always the magic bullet to grow Armidale, even though that you're going to hear that from the population. Thirdly, the whole world thinks growth is the solution to greater prosperity. And you mentioned that at the beginning, and I understand the thinking, because when I moved to Bedlam, everybody thinks, oh, the potential will grow. It's such a trap. May I just suggest Byron Bay, lifestyles, and now the locals can't afford to live there anymore, and we're all having to move out. They have a terrible crisis. So one of your challenges is if you're going to have a lifestyle as part of your growth model, you need to harvest the people who are selling $2 million houses to help be your income to provide the resources they want to enjoy and not do it just through rates that drives out the poor. That's what I just comment. And lastly, James Rankin, I read your financial report. It was nice and accessible and very interesting reading. So they're my comments. Brilliant. Thank you.
A little bit. I guess I wanted to say that I'm completely supportive of this vision in many ways, but in many ways it is a worst case scenario and things may change, and there may be some capacity to, I suppose, what's the word they use these days for being able to be flexible is a new one, isn't it?
Pivot.
Pivot, agile, that's the one. There's some agility around this, because when you have a worst case scenario, it's based on where we are now and what we're able to do with our limited capacity. That changes as we get greater capacity. It also may change as I'm going to say governments change, situations change. There may be a whole different capacity to get more for the regions. So I think that in some ways we are looking at getting you all on board for, in some ways, a great idea to grow, but also a worst case scenario in some ways that I wouldn't be looking too pessimistically about this. Things do change. And as we make more positive steps and are able to attract better things, it won't be, it will be an exponential growth of opportunities. So I think that first step is important to be able to grab those opportunities, that's all.
Look, and it is the value of life that we're actually talking about, I believe. I can only put this stuff in the layman's terms. I think the majority of the people here, after going through what we've been through the last 3 or 4 years, we won't go through the whole thing of it, but we do need a bit of a break here. We do need to have a bit of confidence in what we're doing as a community. We hear that regional New South Wales is going ahead, and we've seen that in all our pricing of our homes, and which doesn't probably make it better for our kids coming along, because we think, well, you know. But I put it up there one time. I said to Sam, I said, we're living above our means, and he said, well, we haven't been living below our means because the government actually sets us up to fail as a council, you know. Why should we have to bloody crawl and scream and carry on about what we think we deserve? And I agree with most of the community here with a lot of the things that's happening over the time, but I think we've just got to have a bit of confidence in each other now and say, right, we are in it. It's a bit of a different ball game now. What we've been through, we're on our way up, and I also agree. But look, we don't want to be Tamworth. Don't compare us to Tamworth at all as far as the population goes or anything like that. We want to be Armidale and Guyra, and we're still going to be Armidale and Guyra. But we've got to accept that our population is coming up, and they will come here, and they're looking already. You know, we've got all the different names. We've got to be able to cater for that, and we've got to show them that it's a good place to live. But we don't have to expand our population by 100%. But we've got to start accepting that we are on a climb up. So we've got to have jobs. We've got to have affordable living and live in the best place in the bloody country, which is where we are. And we might have a frost in the morning by the looks of the sky, but I don't know. But we do enjoy it, frost, don't we? Yeah.
Thanks. Karen, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. To your points, and on the back of what John said, it's not set up at all, but growth, I think it's still important. I mean, if we don't grow, we're in trouble.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay.
Just not growth is the magic goal.
No, it's not the only, you know, but
You got to do it the right way.
returning to the region after 30 years away and coming back to realise that the population side really haven't changed was a bit disturbing. And I think we're suffering the symptoms of that lack of growth, and that's effectively what we've got. So we do have to have some growth agenda. I was going to say that, and I like the way that Sam puts it, that we don't want to be Tamworth, and Tamworth can never be Armidale. I mean, they can't be us. We don't want to be them. I think that's fair.
They can't be us.
They
don't
can't
have
be us,
an
but we don't want to be them.
Well, it's all about us, you know. But
We
with
come
that,
out on top.
yeah, we will be. But we have to try a bit harder than we've been trying. Tourism, I've got a passion with tourism. It's not the magic bullet either. So we're not suggesting that that's the only thing. But one of the things that we did talk about is if we want to get growth, we need to have our tourism more vibrant, more connected, more joined up, because a lot of the people that we expect to move here will probably come as tourists in the beginning, and they'll try before they buy, and then if they like what they see and they experience, and the lifestyle's there, then they'll choose to come here. So we do have to do something there, but it's not the only answer, you're right. Oh, and one clarification, sorry, gentlemen over here. When I said I nearly fell off the chair, I'm not trying to de-sell this thing. I nearly fell off the chair because all I heard was in the text message, it's a 50%. When I came back and went through what it really means, it's okay, it sounds palatable. So, yeah.
Someone
Well,
beat you to it.
Sam had his hand up, Luke Ellis, grab the microphone.
My name's Sam Ulrich, and I'm a mistake there, but I'm just curious, do you have any plans in place how to encourage business to come to Armidale and make it grow? Because I've heard over years, 20 years, for the past 20 years, council have sort of pushed business away from Armidale. So what's the plan to grow business and encourage it to come to Armidale now?
It really is an attitudinal thing. I remember being a kid here, and you'd hear the stories that we want to be an education place, and that's just proven to be a loser. There's no doubt about that. I don't care what colour someone's shirt is, whether it's blue collar, white collar, high vis. So I think what we can do as council is to be seamless. If you want to come here, no, this goes against what you were just saying, but if you want to come here, and we're making some changes, or they've already been made, we have business concierge. If you want to come and set up, we'll have someone that sits with you and talks you through the process. So we need, if you've got a complying DA or whatever it is, we should be able to get that through as quickly as we possibly can. So we really want to start squiring people around. In terms of going out and getting, that is something, so being proactive rather than reactive. That's the sort of thing that you could consider, reverse trade missions, going and pitching to government, set up, Department of Ag here in Bradley Street. Makes a whole lot of sense. So they're things that, we as councillors and some of the exec can do, those reverse trade missions to government, reverse trade missions to business. But we have to be pretty targeted about that. We really need to think, well, not getting back to we want to be an education centre, but what are the likely winners? So what's working well here? What's a complementary or an adjacent business? Let's go and chase those. And the other thing that we need, and this is the other great thing about this region, there are a lot of success stories. We need to get those success stories out. We've got to stop bagging the place, which is the natural attitude, to talk the place down. So one thing I think council can do is to spread that message. We are this is the place where you want to be. We've got a seamless council, we can help your business set up. And look, if you're successful, you're not going to be lonely here. There's a lot of other success around. So I think, confidence breeds confidence, but I think what council can do are two things. Be a seamless, frictionless council when business comes in or sniffing around, or even for existing businesses want to expand. We need to be seamless. Because a lot of the growth is going to come from what's already here. And the second one is proactively go out. Use connections, not just of us as councillors and exec, but use connections from you people here. I've got a few friends in town who are pretty connected around the place, and they have said, happy to come with you on these reverse trade missions and talk about why we have headquartered ourselves here, why it is good, what that can do for your industry. So I would like to see a bit more of that. We just need a bit of time and a bit of money to do it. So, there we go.
Susan.
Sorry, Susan wants to. Susan, a quick go, and then Gordon.
I was just going to say, in follow-up to Stan, that council's been doing a few workshops and things. We've looked and thought about what industries would be useful for the region, but we are always open to people's ideas. And I mean, going back to our what's in our budget, I mean, one of the things that's in our budget is $100,000 for our website and technology, because both Guyra and Armidale had different website issues, and one of the things that's huge is like what doesn't that together they don't work, right? So when people want to do things, they're not the same and they don't work, and we're doing background issues and things, and that's a big ticket item. It's a huge thing, but we're hoping that something like that is going to make things better for the community, right? But at the moment, sometimes some things that work, but we've got the concierge thing that's happening, but we're always open to ideas and people coming in and saying, what happens? Look, bail us up on the street and, email us, send us a text message, that sort of thing.
So, with your budget for $100,000 for the just the website, how much money are you putting towards training? Like, I know I tried to do a deal 12 months ago and I knocked it on the head because it was just too hard. I couldn't get onto the right people. It took too long to go through. And then I had arguments for 9 months about something, and then finally got it through after 9 months. But by then the job was gone. and like the fellow over here, he's rang up and got in contact with the wrong people or the wrong staff member. Is there any training that you fellas are putting out to your workers to make it easier for us to contact the right people?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, I should say. I guess just broadly, there's a couple of different things I can say, and I'd be interested to know how recent that experience that you've had is. 1 week, there you go, that's pretty recent. So that's just not good enough, so we'll certainly have a look at that. More broadly, and I think just to follow on from a couple of things the Mayor was saying, there's been a significant underinvestment in this region in strategic planning and planning specifically. And so what that means is that the opportunities for us when they come along are just not there for us to be able to take advantage of them. And one of the things, and an example of that is that with the renewable energy zone, hydrogen industries are an incredibly important part of what the future might look like. We have a local environmental planning instrument, or both the Guyra and the Armidale one that's now been merged, that doesn't allow hydrogen technology development. So straight away, we've got the biggest res possibly in Australia, and there's a significant ancillary benefit or add-on to that we just can't take advantage of. So that long-term strategic planning is something that's significantly been missing. Regional activation is a key initiative for us in terms of where we're heading as an organisation, and it's been making sure that people can come in and they can feel the love. So I guarantee, so next time you come in, you'll feel the love from us, because that's how we want to develop as an organisation. We want people from cradle to the grave, no matter what their development might be, whether it's a mum and dad development or whether it's a major industry development, get that same level of service all the way through. And that's where, again, that's where we've been missing out. So we're really focused on that regional activation and making sure that we can really hit the mark there. But we need some money. We need a lot of strategic planning that we've got to do over the next couple of years to restore, I guess, for want of a better phrase, and then really take advantage of that so we can capitalise on those opportunities when they come along into the future.
Thanks.
Can I address what Susan, is it? Sorry? Yeah. What you were saying before is great. Has anybody spoken, like, we don't know, sorry, we don't know how the election's going to go, but assuming that Labor maybe get in, I've already seen where they're putting regional manufacturing all through Queensland and New South Wales and places. And now I know we're not a Labor area, but has anyone ever spoken to them about that, a proposal to put something here? I mean, no, because they, yeah.
I know, and I'm very excited.
We will get around to everyone. James and I, the GM, we went down to Canberra 6 weeks ago or thereabouts to speak to what was then the shadow ministers for regional development, transport, water, etc., etc. So, yeah, we are, we're politically agnostic as a council, but we're also politically proactive as well. So, yes is an answer. I suspect.
Can I answer? Can I just answer a question over here? So I didn't catch your name. Sorry.
Thanks.
To answer part of your question, the fact that James is now here less than a year and a half, and then he's selected some executive members of his team, we are on a pathway to having the most successful, staff council, and then you match it with 11 people who come together and who work very well together, and it's like it's a very successful marriage that we've actually created here. So I think when you talk about change, there's a huge amount of change. I'm sorry if you had the experience only a week ago. It sounds like it's
not a problem.
Poor performance, and as James said, we can't accept that. That's not something that we want to accept. But we are in the best possible place now than we've ever been to succeed, because all the planets are aligned. So I think that's the future.
It's a very small term, so we shouldn't fall in love that quick. I mean, fall out of love that quick, So we might just stay in love till the end of the term. So.
I think like all good marriages, and my wife is here. Yes, you're close, but we won't always agree on everything, but we'll work it out amicably. We'll just have Callum, because he's got the microphone, then Renata can whiz the microphone up to Gordon.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. This is more a statement, so this is my personal opinion from Calvin Schaefer, not representing anyone else at the moment. I'm going to be a bit rude, sorry, because I tweaked my neck this afternoon, and so I'm going to sit down if that's all right. Currently, I saw that there was about a $900 rise per year. Current problem I have is my cattle are worth, my weaners are worth $2,500. The more likely scenario for me at the moment is either the truck's going to hit a pothole, and I'm going to have 3 or 4 head go down, and they're going to be rubbish, or the truck's going to hit the big enough pothole, going fast enough, and a couple of those steers are actually going to go over the top. So I know it seems like a huge amount of money, but if we can actually get our roads up to scratch and our bridges working again and not decommissioned, we can't get semi-trailers or school buses over them, it's actually not that big a heartache coming from my personal opinion.
Thanks, Carl. The other thing that I didn't mention, I highlighted it on my notes, but I skipped it. I shouldn't have, because it was one of the goodies. We are going to look at some offsetting measures as well. So, yes, rates are something that we're looking at from an income point of view, but some offsetting measures. So we're going to look at waste levies, and there's a few places they might be applied. We've been talking with New South Wales farmers groups about some other rural-specific things that probably look, from any objective measure, don't look great. So we're going to talk more about that specifically down the track. The other thing that a group of us have discussed, and we've all discussed probably in different ways, is also just looking at water levies and just being a bit more clever and creative. So there are some offsetting measures. It's not all take is what we're proposing.
Yeah, Gordon, just throw a little bit in there. The information you got there has been put together by the council, no outside consultants. Is that correct?
Yep. Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
And interesting because there is quite a substantial amount of research and everything. Been interesting if you put in or referred and got some data on, say, Professor Brew, Brian Dolby, in regards to this economy of scale. The other one I'd like to mention right at the start, seeing you said it started before the merger. I'd just like to refute that a bit, and I don't think you've done your homework there well. The Guyra Shire was in no way the state that Armdale was in, and we've got a statement from the General Manager here. Guyra was in a substantial situation financially with a 20% rate increase. So I just, with your data there, and you mentioned it, I'd just like to refute that one. Now, the other one is also we've taken on considerable amount of extra costs, land, the waste management fee. Now, we had 18 blocks in there at one stage, and we're paying $150 on those. So, you've got to bear with the community. We've had huge costs and what we've lost. So, for instance, the residential rate came up as 230% more, and that's by the Office of Local Government. That was before the rate harmonisation. So I think you should look at that. The other thing that concerns me is the valuation if it comes up, or when it comes up with the increased land values. So you say 50%, have you taken that into account? So, yeah, these costs are a lot more than what you just put down there. So I'd like to put that point, but I would like to see some more expert people putting that data together rather than yourselves, because really we have heard these stories before, even when the administrator was first here,
how rosy a future it was going to be. So we have heard since before, and it worries me that 12 months down the track, if she gets your increase, are we going to get any further ahead? Okay.
Thank you. Look, we'll have to disagree on, where Guyra was, or we can look into it more. Hear you loud and clear about the rubbish. $150 across 18 properties certainly can't excite you. So that was one of the, the offsetting measures that I, mentioned a second ago. But sure, I think we've been taking notes, so we'll listen up. Thank you. Any other questions?
Can I just validate one thing?
Yeah.
I actually agree I had my zombie list, and one of the zombie lists from my actual investigation is that Guyra wasn't nearly as bad. That was a presentation of the state government, and we're never allowed to see the figures. And I actually do believe Guyra was performing much better than is repeatedly zombie-like presented, given that its rates were 30% less than all the surrounding shires, with less services because the lifestyle here was more self-service. And I just feel it's a really valid comment, and I think, and not that we need to move forward, I agree with that, but I just don't agree with that zombie myth that Guyra was terrible. Because I believe, from my understanding, was anyone that got its books done independently, externally. I know a lot of other surrounding councils and a lot of amalgamation went, I don't know how we missed that, not that they say it publicly, and it was pretty well preset. And I think with the $2 million for the difficult task of combining staffing, but then the extra sweeteners, if that had been distributed proportionally, Guyra could have continued to address it. It was already well ahead in its bridge structure and all of the expensive stuff. So I just want to really reinforce that Guyra should be proud that we actually had a fairly good functional council. We may not have met everything because we wanted low rates. That was our choice. We choose not to have a rate rise. And, I'm not saying it represents the current council, but historically, Armidale did have some very deep deficits from legal actions and all sorts of dysfunction. So I just want to validate that. But we need to move forward.
And I can only but iterate on that, and it's a little bit like small business and big business, which is the same thing. We are, when we're a small community, we're a lot more personalised, and we actually can work together a lot easier than what we are in Armidale. And I think most of us can relate to that, because that's probably where I'm envious of a smaller council. I'm envious of Guyra, smaller communities, Guyra and Uralla and Walker and stuff like that, because you are more personal communities, Armidale, it isn't as big as Tamworth, but you can stick Tamworth, mate. I'd never live down there. But it's getting a compromise, I suppose. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Hang on a second.
Yep.
Now, you're raving on about Tamworth. Mate, Tamworth fell backwards to get the abattoirs down there. Okay? What have Armidale done? Any industry comes to Armidale, what have they done?
This is the past we're talking about.
That's what we're trying to move forward.
You're talking about Tamworth.
Yeah, but the people are comparing us to
No,
Tamworth.
but I'm saying Tamworth has grown.
Not
Because
without
they've
a
fallen
doubt.
backwards for the abattoirs and other industry down there. What industry have Armidale got? He's talking about increasing the population. How are you going to do it? You sold all your assets. You sold Guyra's assets. So where are you going to get the money from? How are you going to increase the population? Tell us. Other than tourism.
I never mentioned tourism.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
Not as an
my
increase.
colleagues did, but anyway, the obvious ones, first up would be the renewable energy zone. So that is something that, first of all, there's the construction phase. But if we're clever, then we can have really build a renewables ecosystem around it. So that is one. The other big one would be intensive horticulture, not just here in Guyra, but we've got stuff to the east of Armidale as well. That's our real comparative advantage if, and it's a big if, we have the water security to do it. So Without the water security, we're not going to be able to grow. But they are probably that intensive horticulture, renewable energy zone. They're the things that set us apart compared to any other region. And Todd, mentioned before, we don't want to be Tamworth. Tamworth can't be us. Yeah.
You can't knock Tamworth for not going ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm not knocking them at all. For a whole bunch of reasons, growth has been good there. So, in answer to your question, where am I going to grow? Where are we going to grow our region? The renewable energy zone, we have to be clever about that, and we have to latch onto that. And the other one really is intensive horticulture.
And it's probably my comment that you're responding to, and I said that we don't want to be Tamworth and they can't be us. But that doesn't mean we don't want to be successful. We don't want to look exactly like Tamworth.
You can't.
Which we can't. But we'll have a different mix of business. And I think the other thing that we've been doing, and we've alluded to it by some of the comments, Armadale's almost rolled out a red carpet all the way down to Tamworth each time some opportunity came here and slid down the hill. And we want to retract that red carpet and lay it out here and make sure that we're the ones that are actually getting the benefit here, because we have a different attitude, like Sam said, about the strategic planning viewpoint, and we want to succeed. So, not knocking Tamworth. Tamworth's great. I've lived there. Don't particularly like it, but I like it here, which is why I've returned here from my global travels and returned here with my family. So, yeah.
All right. Just do you need to come in that?
I was only just going to say one quick thing, just going to your question, sir, about where the growth's going to come from. The one thing that industry wants, and I'm sure you would all see this, whatever development you might do, they want surety. And so they want to know that they can come into a region, Armadale, Guyra, wherever it might be, and that very quickly they can get development approval and they can start their construction of their business, which I think goes to your question earlier on. And so part of the stuff that Dan and his team and we're working on really closely with the Department of Planning is essentially, for want of a better phrase, local activation precincts, where we do all the planning and the work up front, and essentially and they do this in the special activation precincts around New South Wales at the moment, it's essentially a 30-day guaranteed approval. And so we're doing a lot of work in the background, and that's why that strategic planning work that hasn't been done for a long time is so imperative. We want to get to that point, albeit through a local activation precinct, that when people come in across the counter, we can guarantee them an approval within 30 days. Now, we've got a lot of work to do to get there, but once people have got that surety, they will flock here, because that's all they want. They want that level of surety and security.
Rob, you had your hand.
Thanks, Sam. I think most people know me, Rob Lenehan. We've got serious problems which we have to, as a community, work on, and I do appreciate what's happened since the new council was elected only a short time ago. This was never happening prior. We'd have meetings where a limited number of people would turn up, and the councillors and staff couldn't get away from the bowling club quick enough. So that seems to be changing, which gives us a glimmer of hope and a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. But one thing we must remember, and we hate harping on it, and our problems have been dealt with, are historical, some of them, but some are more recent. And, the first one was we were kicked severely by the state government when we were forcibly amalgamated. You talked about kicking the tin along, Sam. Well, that's what's happened to us. And since amalgamation, we haven't just been kicked down the road, we've been kicked to the gutter, mate. Absolutely to the gutter and beyond. And, I'll give you a couple of examples. In recent time, since amalgamation, it should not take in excess of 30 months for a substantial industrial development DA application to be dealt with. It took 30 months, just north of the township. That is one of the problems that you guys really have to address if you want to attract industry. The other one is, who said we really needed to do away with the steel light poles in Guyra? It's happening at the moment. And replaced with fiberglass? Sorry? Fiberglass is a deteriorating product over 25 years, what do we do with them when they're deteriorating? We had steel ones there that seemed perfectly adequate to me. They weren't unattractive. Odd one admittedly needed a coat of paint. But this is where your inefficiencies are there, and some are historic, as I said, and some are still current. I thought we may have avoided that with a certain replacement of one of your employees, but that hasn't happened. You've had budgets that have totally blown out on you over a period of time, not so much with this council because you haven't got any dough to do anything with. So you've been left. You've been left, mate. It's a very smelly shit carter's hat you've been left with. So I really think that there's problems within your own council where you have to look, and this probably reflects to James more than anything. He's very approachable and I've got no problem with that. But you really need to tidy up some of your management business side of things, I feel, and I'm constantly amazed speaking to councillors that have no idea what's going on in administration. You ask them questions about proposals that are going in and they don't know. I can't see why there has to be this no communication bridge there between administration, and I mean the administration right down to the grader driver, and councillors. I know it's a problem and the state government has special requirements where councillors can't deal with certain topics and blah, blah, blah. I think that's what we're missing here in Guyra, because we had that with our old council. Small, yes, but very efficient. And we had some black money in bank accounts. Never forget that, please, all you councillors. Armidale and Merrick had red numbers. Thanks.
Just wondering what's happening with the Armidale airside business park. Sorry, before Armidale. Just wondering what's happening up there. Have any lots been sold or have any contracts been signed?
65% of the airside business park lots have been sold. Alrighty, any other questions? Look, on that note, let me go right back to what I said at the start, and that is, thank you so much for coming along. I really didn't know how many people were going to turn up, and I'd say I'm absolutely buoyed with the number of people that have turned up. I'm thrilled with the questions that you guys have put to us. Please keep asking questions. One of the things that we really need to do is to be very transparent. There's no upside in hiding anything. So thank you for coming along. We've got, may this continue. Let's keep having these good community talks. So if Darren hasn't eaten all the biscuits, there'll be some biscuits over there, there's some tea, some coffee. Thanks for coming, guys.